Turning your podcast into a business is all about finding new ways to monetize your podcast. This video, I'm going to share with you a bunch of different ways that you can monetize your podcast, a little or a lot. So specifically, I'm going to cover 4 basic strategies. They're not the only 4 out there, but they're my 4 favorite strategies. The first strategy is sponsorship and advertising revenues. The second strategy is charging for episodes, or actually charging for certain episodes. The third strategy is directly selling products and services from your podcast. And the fourth strategy is driving leads into other products and services that are indirectly related to the podcast. So let's talk about the first strategy, sponsorships and advertising. Now, this is usually the most common monetization strategy that people think of with podcasts. And that comes from the fact that podcasts are sort of a new version of TV or radio, and advertisements have always been the way that people monetize TV programs and radio programs. So sponsorships and ad sales, because of that history, they tend to have a more traditional approach to monetization. Not always, but they tend to, which means that it's really about audience size and demographic. So if you have a large podcast, then absolutely, meaning a large audience for your podcast, then absolutely advertising and sponsorship revenues are going to be pretty easy to generate. That said, if your audience is small, it's generally going to be a lot more difficult. So let me go back to the large scenario. If you have a large audience, there are a whole bunch of different platforms that you can get onto that will insert advertising into your podcast. Now, when I say large, I'm talking a few 100,000 or even a few million downloads for your podcast. And especially if you have a consistent amount of thousands and millions of downloads every single episode that you put out. So that type of podcast is usually very easy to generate advertising revenues to and sponsorships to. Here's an example of someone who does really well with that. If you've ever seen Awaken with JP's videos, he does these spoofs on spirituality and coaching, and he's got a really nice big audience. I think he gets hundreds of thousands of views per episode, and he's able to charge for sponsorship and advertising on his podcast. Now, the way he does it is at the end of every episode, he actually personally talks about and endorses a product using his trademark humor. That's the absolute best case scenario for a client, for you as the host to be endorsing their product or service and to be talking about it. But other ways that you can do sponsorships and ad revenues is you can actually open up time in your podcast, and they can insert, using these platforms, pre-recorded ads into those slots. Now that's a little bit less effective, because if you're endorsing a product, it's different than if you just put like an ad, splice in an ad. Think about it from the traditional media standpoint. If you see your favorite newscaster holding up a product and endorsing it, that's more compelling than when you just see an advertisement, spliced in between the program. So again, with advertising and sponsorship, your audience size and demographic matters a lot. But if you have a small audience, that doesn't mean that you can't do sponsorship and ad revenues. It just means that it's probably going to be a little bit more work, and you're going to have a more targeted product. So whereas a podcast that has a huge audience can advertise a low price point product because that's a mass market model. If you have a small podcast, but it's very targeted, and you have a very loyal and engaged audience, generally speaking, you can offer a higher price point product because the advertiser might only need to sell 1 or 2 of these products or services in order to make back their advertising investment. So there's one word of warning about this model, and that is that it can reward you for compromising your values. All right, so you want to be careful with this model, because it's really important that if you are going to take advertising or sponsorship revenues, that you choose products that are aligned with your value system. You're developing a relationship with your listeners. They are trusting you. If you endorse a product that messes with them, that disappoints them, that breaks or that doesn't work, they're going to associate you with that breach of trust. And that can really hurt your podcast over the long haul. So this model, I recommend that you be really careful and mindful about what products or services that you allow to advertise or sponsor your program. So before I get to the other 3 ways to monetize your podcast, let me invite you to like my video and also subscribe to my channel. So the second way to monetize a podcast is to actually charge for certain episodes. So if you have a podcast that you make available to everybody, which I highly recommend, you can also introduce special episodes with certain masters or certain really elite people that you charge for. So you can have an episode every week, and then every month or so you can have a special episode just for people who buy it, or for members who subscribe to your VIP podcast. So those are a couple different ways that you can charge for episodes and make money for the episodes themselves. A third way to make money on your podcast is to sell your own products or services directly. So for example, with Awaken with JP is another example, he has these funny, spiritual, tongue-in-cheek t-shirts that he promotes and sells on the podcast. So you could potentially sell books or programs or mugs or any number of things directly from your podcast and send people to a page where they can immediately directly purchase that product or service. So the fourth way that I'm going to talk about in this video to monetize is actually my very favorite way, and that is to use your podcast to indirectly drive leads to other programs and services. So rather than in the last example where we would directly market or sell certain products or services, in this case, you can use your podcast to drive opportunities. So instead of directly having a call to action to buy something, the call to action would be to connect, to have a meaningful conversation, to basically connect with you to discuss opportunities for ways that you can help these people. So this is the way that I used my podcast mostly. So there's this one strategy that's my absolute favorite and the one that I used with my podcast. And it's a strategy that I learned from a guy named Doug Sandler, who has the Nice Guys on Business podcast. So this strategy is a way of turning your guests from your podcast into clients. Now, Doug Sandler basically blew my mind. I was doing my podcast for months, actually years, when I was getting tired of it. I was producing all these podcast episodes, and we were trying to make money and make prospects from our listeners. And Doug Sandler was the first person who said, that's not the way that you get leads from your podcast. The way you do it is to turn your guests into clients. Blew my mind. And he was right, because I'd already had it happen by accident, where I was interviewing a guest and we hit it off so well that at the end of the call, at the end of the interview, I said, hey, do you want to connect? Because I really feel like what I offer could really help you. And she said, sure. And she ended up joining my retreat, my Inner Circle program. So if you want to learn more about that strategy, I am not the person to teach it to you. Go ahead and learn it from Doug Sandler himself. You can go to turnkeypodcast.com/superstar, and that's his program that'll teach you how to turn podcast guests into clients. I hope this video was valuable for you, and if it was, and you want to go deeper and maybe even explore if and how I might be able to personally help you build and grow your podcast business, then let's connect. You can find me at superstaractivator.com/go, and you can set up a discovery call with me for free so we can explore together. I look forward to meeting you.